Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Asia Movie Pulse interviews. I am Sean Barry, and today I am joined by filmmaker Marc Marriott. Marc is the director of the film Tokyo Cowboy, a clever feature that follows businessman Hideki, who takes a business trip to Montana, where he is hit with culture shock and finds himself on a personal journey of self-discovery. Thanks for being on, Marc.
Thanks for inviting me. I'm
Of
really happy
course,
to be here.
we're happy to have you here. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing really well. Thank you.
Happy to hear, man. So, Marc, before we really go into the inner details of the film, I understand that acclaimed filmmaker Yoji Yamada was a major influence on you. And my question is, did any of that inspiration play into making Tokyo Cowboy?
Yeah, so I had the great fortune of being an apprentice to Yoji Yamada, Kantoku. And this was 30 years ago. And so I was very young, and it was even before I went to film school at UCLA. And I just had this wonderful experience. I had lived in Japan for 2 years prior to that, and could speak some Japanese. And I contacted him and asked him if he would be willing to take on an apprentice, and he did. And I worked on one of the Torasan films, the 42nd film in the series, and that was the one where Torasan goes to Vienna. So Kokoro no Tabiji was the name of that Torasan film. And I just was really impressed with Yoji Yamada. I continue to be. He's 91 years old. He's still directing basically a film a year. His 91st film, I think it is. I think it's called "Mom, Is That You?" And it was at the Hawaii Film Festival recently with our film Tokyo Cowboy. So that was a really awesome kind of full circle moment for me, having a film in the same festival as my mentor. But he just makes these films that are very warm and humorous and filled with a lot of humanity. And I definitely aspire to make films like that. He once described himself as kind of being a soba noodle chef, right? He's just kind of content to produce bowl after bowl of this nourishing cinema soup. And I just love that idea. He's a craftsman. He just continues to tell these stories, and what a beautiful thing that he does. And so I definitely had that in mind, his kind of approach to filmmaking as I went into this project, Tokyo Cowboy.
Mhm. And you definitely, I'm glad you bring that up about Yoji Yamada because that's really something that is prominent throughout all of his work, regardless of like what kind of movie it is, whether it's The Yellow Handkerchief or probably his most famous film internationally, The Twilight Samurai.
Twilight Samurai series, yeah.
Um, or one of his a little more kind of a lesser known work is Kobe Our Mother, which deals with anti-war themes with the family trying to live their lives in a time where nationalism was really prominent, but it still has a lot of that, like you said, earnest humanity to it that you often don't see in a lot of Japanese filmmaking nowadays. And even to this
Yeah.
day, he still maintains that kind of style. So it must have been an honor to really like learn from someone as, you know, as how do you say, someone as like wise with the art of filmmaking as him.
Yeah.
And especially like you said, the Tora-san movies is one of the most long-running Japanese film series, period. And I believe
Yeah.
a few years ago there was like a anniversary film or like a
It
tribute film
was.
that he did.
Yeah, that's correct.
Um,
And of course, the main actor had died by that time, but it was all of his family and the regular characters from the Torasan film series. So just an amazing director that has had an amazing career.
Yeah, absolutely. And you definitely see a lot of that warmth and earnest humanity, especially in Tokyo Cowboy. So it's very much like the mentor has like, you know, taught the apprentice, and now the apprentice is following in the footsteps of a master.
That that's certainly my hope and what I'm striving for. I appreciate that
Mhm.
sentiment.
Right. And of course, one of the aspects about Tokyo Cowboy is that it's very one of the most notable things about the film right from the get-go that is very like commendable about it is the writing.
Mm,
And this was a duo written screenplay
yeah.
by Dave Boyle and Ayako Fujitani. So my question is, what led to your involvement in working with Dave Boyle and Ayako Fujitani for the screenplay? And were you familiar with their work beforehand?
Yeah. So, and just backing up a little bit from there, I had this idea in the back of my head. It was about that same time when I did the apprenticeship with Yoji Yamada. I read an article in Outside Magazine, and it was called Samurai Slickers, and it described a
Mm,
ranch in Montana owned by a Japanese company, and they would send workers over to learn ranching, learn how to be cowboys in the American West, and that just
that's
kind of
great.
yeah,
That's so great.
it was this idea, and I was just like, that's a movie. Like, that's the beginning of a movie. That's a great idea. And so all these many years later, I was expressing to a good friend of mine, Brigham Taylor, who's a well-known producer for Disney, has only done big studio films. And I expressed a desire to him to direct a feature. And he's like, hey, let's talk about it. And we set up a meeting, and I described to him just the beginning of this idea. And it really was just kind of, it wasn't fleshed out at all. And the genius that Brigham has, of kind of helping to develop a story. He has such an encyclopedic knowledge of film and the ability to develop stories. But he was really interested because it was a different proposition, very different proposition than a studio film that is constrained in many ways by being big and popular, and some of those kind of more formulaic elements that need to be there. And he was just interested in making an independent film. This would be his first independent film, my first film as a director, and just to follow that character's journey, just to think about only the requirement of figuring out what the best story would be, and telling this character's journey. So we developed the film to a point, and then we knew we needed some really good screenwriters. Brigham had worked with Dave Boyle on a Disney project, and knew about him and knew about his cross-cultural experience. And certainly Man from Reno was one that
Yes.
he introduced me to. I watched that film, and I was just blown away by the great work that he had done in Man from Reno, and which also introduced me to Ayako, because she was the actress in Man from Reno. And so we had a discussion, and it was interesting because Dave, his first reaction was kind of, this is a very different film than what he had been used to doing. Man from Reno is this kind of very tightly constructed thriller. And what we were talking about was a film that could breathe, a film that was kind of
Film
about
that can
these,
breathe.
yeah, that was about these kind of beautiful moments in between, these kind of heightened moments of beauty in everyday interactions. And but he was intrigued by it, and thought it was a really good start to the story. We also, at that time, Brigham and I talked about, we really need a Japanese perspective in this film. We one of the first things that was just paramount was getting this right in terms of the cultural aspects of the film, and showing the culture in the right way, and not relying on any kind of stereotypical treatment of cultures. And so Ayako was suggested. We learned that she was a writer, and we asked if they would team up together, and then they wrote. Just like the first draft of the screenplay was just almost ready to shoot. It was just masterful and beautiful, and I was so excited to have their great talent.
So really it was just a bunch of creative minds coming together for like almost as if it was destined to happen.
Yeah, it kind of felt like that. And film is such a collaborative medium. This is
Hmm.
definitely something that I couldn't do on my own. And that's the beauty of it, is to find the right people and just let them do what they do best. And certainly Dave and Ayako just did just an amazing job. I'm so happy and grateful.
Well, when you're dealing with different cultures and cross-cultural interaction, it really is honestly a great idea to have, different people, different minds come together because one of the biggest issues with a lot of media, especially a lot of American media nowadays, is the emphasis on very predictable and very like tasteless stereotypes that really are just there to kind of get a cheap laugh as opposed to amount to perhaps in immersive storytelling or teach us something that's different from what we are used to in our own lifestyle.
Yeah, absolutely. And we knew that we wanted to make a film that was a drama and about this character's journey, but also that there would be a lot of humor in it. But we really wanted the humor to come out of just these natural situations, and for the humor not to be forced in any way, for it all to feel very authentic and real.
Right. For many of us, like when we go to a foreign setting for the first time, it does feel a little peculiar. And I'm not saying that in a negative way. It feels a little peculiar because we're
That's
not
the beauty
used
of
to
it,
it.
right? The wonder.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
wonder, the like the mystery,
yeah,
really. But even like other people that are very interested in culture, but are perhaps still a little bit unfamiliar with certain aspects. A great example, I think, is with Scout's character in the movie, who is obsessed with Japan, but of course, not in a demeaning way, is still learning
yeah,
elements of Japanese culture, but it's
yeah,
not like poking fun of like in a very ridiculed manner. It's a very like very real manner, and I'm sure that there's a lot of young people like her character that have been in that position when they're learning about another culture.
yeah. And isn't she delightful? Scout Smith does
Absolutely.
a great job in the role of Cindy.
Hmm. And describing what I just brought up, and its killing aspect of the movie is the authentic portrayal of culture shock. Something often stereotypically depicted in a lot of media, while here it grounds the story and greatly humanizes these characters. It helps make them feel more real as opposed to, how do you say, characterettes, where they're very just kind of baseless stereotypes with one note like jokes to their character.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Whether, oh,
I
go
was
ahead.
just gonna say that, like, we've had several uh people that have interacted with us and helped us in the making of the film. And one of the really important people was Morio Amagi, who's one of our executive producers, who was the one that introduced us to Arata Ayura and Jun Kunimura. And when he watched the film several months ago, he said something like, "This feels like it was a film made by a Japanese filmmaker." And like, that to me was like the highest compliment I could ever get for this movie. So
It really feels, it feels like an international project, but also has that sense of international collaboration. It really comes in full force when you watch the movie.
yeah, so glad to hear that. Thank you.
Of course, absolutely. Were there any like personal experience? I know you mentioned earlier, of course, your experiences with Yoji Yamada, but were there any personal experiences beyond that for you or for the rest of the cast and the crew that served as influence for depicting culture shock within the film in order to get that like level of authenticity that felt just right for the final cut of the film?
Absolutely. I think one of the things was just my own experience living in Japan. I feel like the character journey of Hideki in the film mirrors a little bit of what I experienced, in that when after I was in Japan for a little while, I kind of became much more quiet. I kind of got a little bit of humility and started to listen more. And
Mhm.
that's part of what this character finds out that he needs to do in this journey to America, is like he, and almost like listen to the part of him that's very Japanese too, and bring that out. But just that need to kind of become more humble when you're in another culture, and to learn from that culture. And then what was really cool is that Arata, our actor, had never done a film outside of Japan. He's done many films in Japan, well-known actor there, but this was his first film outside of Japan in America, and he really was experiencing this same culture shock and kind of experience of, he had never been to Montana, and doesn't really speak English, and so it really mirrored his experience, and we tried to use that. We talked a lot about, using some of those same experiences and feelings in the film so that it would come across as being very authentic.
Seems like he was perfectly cast then for the role, judging by what you just
Absolutely,
said.
yeah. I really can't imagine anybody else in this role now, but to be honest, I couldn't at the time. I mean, he was our number one choice, and he immediately responded positively and said that he would do the film. Of course, he said, he wouldn't be available for like another 8 months, and so we had to make the decision to wait for him to be able to have him in the film. But it was the best decision we made.
Hmm. I mean, he is a very, well-known actor, especially when you've worked with directors like Hirokazu Korida. You're gonna have a very, tight schedule in the industry.
Yeah,
But
I mean, we were surprised how tightly these actors, Jun and Arata, are scheduled. Really pretty
oh yeah,
amazing.
oh
Not
yeah,
much downtime between when they finished their last project and came to Montana.
I'm glad that they were able to be in the project though, ultimately.
Yeah.
Um, and to go back to what I said earlier regarding shallow representations of, cross-cultural interaction in media, it seems that maybe, I don't know if you feel the same, but perhaps are audiences more accustomed to comedically shallow representations of cross-cultural interaction in media, likely out of fear of the unknown or lack of interest in broadening their horizon?
I mean, I think it's the easy thing to do, right? It's and to get a quick laugh, or to make a shortcut kind
A
of.
cop out. It's a cop out.
Yeah. I remember when I came back from Japan, it was right around that time the film Gung Ho was released. And
Mhm.
I really love Ron Howard, and I think he's an amazing director. But I also felt when I came back from Japan and I watched that film, I'm just like, these aren't Japanese characters. These aren't real people. These are just stereotypical cutouts of what we
Right.
as Americans think a Japanese person is like. And I was also really surprised because one of the films that I have loved for many years, and I think is a really wonderful film, is Lost in Translation. It was one of the
Mm.
films that we talked about in terms of like, this is almost kind of like the reverse of Lost in Translation. But I was interested to find out from Dave, actually, Dave Boyle, that Lost in Translation had not been a very well received film in Japan. And as I looked back and thought about it, I realized, well, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because the Japanese characters in that film really are not real people. They're kind of more stereotypical.
They're
Um,
to be blunt, they're kind of in that movie, no disrespect to the actors in that movie, they're cartoony.
yeah, yeah, and so
Unrealistic, very unrealistic.
yeah. And so there is, I think it's just, again, it's the easy thing to do, and in the reverse of that is it's hard to depict culture in an authentic way, and to really show each person and different culture and language in a way that is real and authentic. So we talked a lot about that. Like there's a quinceanera scene in Tokyo Cowboy, and that's a really pivotal and important part of the film. Really wanted to get that right, and so we asked our director of photography, Oscar Jimenez, who had personal experience. We asked other people on set that were there. We were kind of like, does this feel right? We were constantly asking on set, like, is this authentic? Does this feel right? Would this character do this? Just kind of mining for those authentic moments, because I realize my own, blind spots. I don't know everything, and need to make sure that I'm kind of checking in with people and make sure that we're doing things right.
It definitely must have helped having Ayako with writing the screenplay
Yeah,
in that
absolutely.
regard.
Yes, yeah, definitely. She brought such a great perspective to it, particularly in the relationship between Hideki and Keiko in the film.
Yes.
She was so instrumental in kind of fleshing out that relationship, and how that would work in the film, and yeah, it's really wonderful.
Right. And also making them feel like real people as opposed to just, a by the numbers slice of life journey.
Yeah,
Making it feel like something that anyone universally can relate to.
yeah,
Um,
and that's the beauty, right? Like, when you really get a cultural depiction right, when you go deep enough into it, then it does feel universal. It does feel like, it's the human condition. We're all very similar, and there's similar things in each culture, but you have to get really specific, and dive a little bit deeper to find the cultural nuances that help you see the humanity and see how we're all the same.
if anything, it's a movie that like urges the audience to travel or to like learn more about the world that we inhabit.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah.
And that definitely really comes into the themes within the film, which are ones that, like I said, can universally click with audiences regardless of their background. Do you personally hope that this will help motivate viewers to reflect on themselves and possibly explore unfamiliar territory, similar to what Hideki and his friend Javier do in the film?
Yeah. I mean, these are really universal themes. And this is a film about bridging those divides between people and between cultures. And it really speaks to, the need that we all have to kind of slow down and listen more and open our hearts to other people. And so that is the journey of Hideki in this film. And I do hope that the audience can see themselves in him, and have a similar desire to do those things, to slow down, to listen, to connect. This is a character that at the beginning of the film is not connected to anything, really. He's not connected to the land. He's not connected to his fiancée. He's not connected really to his job,
Or to himself,
or
really.
to himself. Yeah. And so I think that's just something universally that we all need to. Um, I hope it's a timely message. I feel it, and the need to do that, and so I hope others do too.
If anything, like his friendship with Javier really brings the best out of him and really gets him to think more and more about his relationships, not just with work, but also his fiance. Because Javier, if anything, the character of Javier is really like a very brilliant, like polar opposite to Hideki.
Yeah.
And additionally, like there's some great humor, especially when they're getting to know each other. But
Yes.
as it goes along, there's more and more like helping Hideki like explore more of himself. But Hideki also using some of his, strengths to help Javier kind of explore outside of his comfort zone because without spoiling anything, there are definitely some hurdles, personal hurdles of that are related to fear that come full circle with Javier's character as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the actors have wonderful chemistry in the movie. Arata Ira and Goya Robles. I hope I'm getting that right.
Yeah, Goya Robles.
Goya Robles and Arata have wonderful chemistry, and it feels like watching two friends. Um, did the actors throughout the whole film, did they frequently interact beforehand to build that camaraderie to make their interactions feel more authentic?
In terms of Arata and Goya, not really. They kind of
Really?
met in Montana and hadn't had time to spend together. That I think that's just a testament to their skill as actors, their ability to connect uh, with each other. Ayako had spent a bit of time with Arata online, helping him with his English pronunciation.
Mhm.
And so they did spend a bit of time getting to know each other, and with her helping him. He had to do a lot of work to
Yeah.
get to where he could be understood and speak English in the way that we needed to him to. Even though he the film is about a character that can't really speak English very well, you
Yeah.
still have to come up to a certain level to just be
Right.
understood. And so he did a lot of work in that, and they spent time together,
Mhm.
got to know each
Was
other. Yeah.
was there a little bit of what Goya Robles had to do with making kind of a little different but similar situation, making helping us make buy that this character is a native to Montana? Did he have to do any of that, like in particular, like with riding the horse or like knowing
Yeah.
about
I mean, really incredible because Goya is really a city kid, and he had never ridden a horse before this film. So he showed
really?
about a week before filming, and that's all the time that he had to get familiar with riding a horse, how to do rope tricks, all of that. And he really looks so comfortable and so authentic in that role in the film. And again, like he really put a lot of effort into that, and I was really happy with him, and also our wranglers that were helping him to learn.
Was it a similar case with Robin Weigart with knowing about a lot of the Montana culture? Because she definitely really makes that character feel authentic.
Yeah, well, and one of the most well-known roles for Robin was Calamity Jane, um, in is it Deadwood, I think.
Yes, yeah, Deadwood.
So she definitely came with a lot more experience riding horses, being in the American West, and kind of had that under her belt. And so she used that, and I just love her performance. She did a great job.
Absolutely. And definitely one thing I like about her character is that um and this is actually another thing. It's not really a spoiler, but it's like it's one of the beauties of the film is that there really isn't an antagonist in the movie.
Right.
There's conflicts, but they're more like personal and inner.
Yeah.
Um and Robin's character could have easily have just turned into like the stereotypical, like villain that the main character has to overcome. But instead, she's got a coolness to her. The way she thinks makes total sense. And when we go into her backstory, like it all it all feels closer to reality because reality is not always going to be the, you know, stereotypical good versus evil. Reality is way more complex than we give it credit for, not just
Yeah.
in terms of culture, but also personalities. If anything, Jun Kunimura's character is kind of humorously captures a person that desperately wants to fit in, but ends up backfiring. And in the case of his character, it really backfires.
He is so delightful. Like on set, we could not take our eyes off of Jun Kunimura. He is so much fun. And the really amazing thing about him is most of the characters that he plays are actually really severe, harsh, kind of yakuza
Yes,
heavy characters, right?
absolutely.
He's very scary. And Uh, yeah, in fact, I'm searching for the name of the Korean film that he was in that he won like a Korean Academy Award.
The
Um,
Wailing. The
The
Wailing.
Wailing. Thank you. He's so terrifying in that film. And so Brigham and I watched some tape on June, and we both felt like there was another side to June that we aren't really getting to see in all of
Hmm.
these portrayals of very, very scary characters. And so he expressed some interest, wanted to meet on Zoom. We met with him. And in person, Jun Kunimura could not be more just delightful, warm, funny character. And we immediately said, like, this is Wada. This he is the character. And then even when he showed up in Montana, one of the first things that he said in our meetings, we sat down and he said, you know, I've never played a character like this. I honestly don't know how to play this character. And Brigham and I are looking at each other like, June, this is just play yourself. Like this is you are Wada. You know, all you have to do is be yourself. And of course he had no trouble, you know, doing an amazing job in this film. But that was really something delightful because I felt like we were able to present Jun Kunimura in a way that he hasn't really been seen before much.
Hmm.
Not typically anyway. He certainly has the range to be able to do any of those characters. But that was kind of a fun thing that happened with him.
Yeah, and that's one of the I'm glad you brought that up. That's one of the cool things about Jun Kunimura is that he does, when you initially look at him, he does look intimidating. He does look scary. He looks like a guy you do not want to mess with or get on their bad side. But, plenty of actors that have that intimidating look to them can also be funny. I think a great example is Takashi Katano.
Yeah.
He's in a lot of, Yakuza movies, and put it bluntly, he's pretty scary looking, but he also can be funny, as we see in like movies like Battle Royale, where he's playing the humorous teacher in the movies. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's one of the beauties is like you can look a certain way with your presence, but like the way you portray a character can really reveal so much.
Yeah. And you can kind
Um,
of use that and play against it, which is very, very interesting.
and funny enough, like he does try to come off playing like the confident, serious businessman at the beginning of the movie, but once he gets into Montana, it definitely kind of he completely devolves into kind of really trying too hard to impress. Whereas like Arata's character, Hideki, really wants to succeed, but eventually he realizes that there's one part that's truly missing in this, which is himself in this whole situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, Speaking of the performances, I think another standout is that even though she was a co-writer on the movie, she also acts in the movie, Ayako Fujitani.
Yeah.
Um, she definitely brings out a lot more of like the dramatic side of the movie. Though she does get her humorous moments, especially with how she plays off Hideki, and their chemistry really is wonderful. Um, my question is, did you see like I know you mentioned Man from Reno, but had you seen any of Ayako's other dramatic work prior to also
I
get an idea of like what she's capable of doing?
yeah, I really had not. I loved her in that film, Man from Reno. And then as we worked with her, um, and saw her ability with the writing, but just kind of like personally interacted with her. Um, I knew from that performance in Man from Reno that she was a really great actress. But just getting to know her personally, it started to really uh, become apparent that like we really should cast her as Keiko in the film.
Mm-hmm.
And I know she may have even been kind of surprised by that, but we were persuasive because we really thought it was a good idea, and it turned out to be
Absolutely.
okay. Yeah,
Um, One thing that Ayako does a lot in a lot of her acting, and you definitely see it in Tokyo Cowboy, is her expressions alone speak volumes about what she's feeling. You definitely see that in plenty of the moments when she interacts with Hideki. Just her eyes alone convey so much of what is going through her head and what she's, trying to convey,
Yeah.
particularly Arata Irai. And Arata Irai, as I mentioned earlier, is a great actor, and he really truly gets to show his range in this movie.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine that it must have been a little intimidating having that, objective of also really playing a character in, a fish out of water type of setting, but also with, also the fact that, like you said, he could speak a little English, but also had never been to Montana. So
Yeah,
major
he
props
really
to
he
him.
really took on this challenge. And in the film he just gets, stripped of everything down to like this lowest point, and really makes this amazing transformation. And so he just really embraced this. He is someone personally that's very interested in connecting with people and with the land, and I think just the themes of the film and the overall story really resonated with him personally. And I know that he's very very happy and proud of the film. And so that's been really wonderful.
He did a great job.
Yeah.
Um, Now, of course, the characters are very prominent in Tokyo Cowboy, but location is just as prominent in the film in conveying the message. You have the very modernized setting of Japan, specifically, I believe the city that takes place in the beginning is Tokyo,
Tokyo. Yeah.
which is a city that is known for its like advanced modernization. And then to the more kind of naturalistic setting of Montana, and it was really effectively communicated through the cinematography. My question is, was that communicated to your DP Oscar along with the art department to really emphasize the different locations to really help in conveying the themes and message of the movie?
Yeah. And Oscar Jimenez is such a talent and wonderful to work with. Some of our earliest conversations about the film, he was really curious to know the tone of the film, because you could take the same script and treat it in a very different way. What I had seen of his work, particularly there was a film called Killing of Two Lovers that he did for Robert Machoian, which is a very different film. It's more of like a 4:3. It's very desaturated, almost black and white. But what I saw in that film and his work as a cinematographer is that he really understood what the core of each scene was. That the emotional core is what they were after. It wasn't just these pretty images, and they really used the camera to illuminate those emotional beats. And so that's what I felt like we needed. We found this location, the Paradise Valley in Montana. It's an amazing location. It's so gorgeous. Crews go there all the time to film commercials. Parts of a river runs through it. We're shot there. And I knew that the beauty of the place and the location as a character almost was going to be there. And what I really wanted was a cinematographer who understood the emotional core of the scenes and what was happening. And really, we used a word, restrained, in our early
Trained.
conversations.
Mm.
We wanted to be restrained with the camera. We didn't want to move. We wanted to do things in kind of long moving master shots that would allow the actors to play out the scene fully and really feel the rhythm of the scene, and not cut too much. And so we were very well. Not only did we stylistically choose to do that, but we really needed to do that because we were on a very tight schedule. We had 15 days of shooting in Montana total, so we were doing about 5 pages a day. And so we
Oof.
didn't have the luxury of shooting every single angle, but neither did we want to. We really wanted to choose what angles and what coverage we were going to go for,
Like
and make
Yoji
it
Yamada,
deliberate.
kind of like Yoji Yamada, with his
Yeah,
camera work.
yeah. So there's kind of a built-in pace to the film, and even if we wanted to speed it up, we really couldn't because of just the what footage we have to work with. But that was definitely something that we wanted. We wanted a film that was very deliberately paced, and something that kind of unfolded in over time, and these characters can kind of develop in a natural way. And those are some of the films that I really love. It's one of the type of films that I really love, and so I wanted to make a film like that.
So you wouldn't want it to be too fast with like all the, like you said, with the cuts.
Yeah, yeah. It's a story that really doesn't call for that.
Mhm. Now, moving forward, do you hope to do another project that plays around with cultural interaction and self-reflection?
Yeah, I mean, I love movies like this. There were a couple of films that were that we talked about and that were inspirations. There's a film called Tender Mercies with Robert Duvall that I really love, that has this kind of same kind of tone and pace. A film that I just have always loved, Babette's Feast, which is
Mhm.
kind of a slower film. Minari was a big influence. I felt like that was such a good film, and so this is definitely one type of film that I really love, and that I would love to do something similar to this again with the right story. Um, and I hope that audiences will respond to that, and that
Mhm.
they'll I think there's kind of a desire in the current audience and film goers
Mm.
to kind of have films that aren't as crazy and frantic and cutty, and just just kind of a slower film movement, almost like the slow food movement, right? That where you it's an alternative to the fast food. You're returning to these preparation techniques that take time and don't use shortcuts, and in the same way. And actually, what's I'm thinking about, the beginning of our conversation about Yoji Yamada and his desire to kind of make this bowl after bowl of nourishing cinematic soup. And one of the things that he's talked about a lot is that he feels like many Japanese filmmakers right now are kind of serving up these nutrition-free desserts, right? And that they're
Interesting.
that
Interesting comparison.
the spiritual hunger that people have isn't being satisfied, right? And so I aspire to make films that would satisfy those those um those same desires, that would be satisfying, right? And so yeah, hopefully depending on how this film goes, and if it's well received, and if we can get it out there and find our audience. And through the film festivals, we've certainly been getting a lot of warm response from audiences, and we've won a few awards in
Tall
the
grass.
yeah, Tallgrass, best narrative feature and audience choice award, so that was really great. And so I'm hopeful that we will be able to show this to a wide audience. We do have a theatrical release planned for Japan already, because Arata and
Great.
June well known there. So probably in June we'll have a theatrical release in
Mhm.
Japan. It'll start in Tokyo, and depending on how it goes, it'll move out beyond that to other markets. But yeah, I really hope that we'll find a way to do a theatrical release here in the United States, and that it'll be in places that people can see it.
Great. And I truly hope that this movie gets widely seen, because it's a movie that should be seen um and digested for all like the attention to detail that it has to offer. like you said earlier, as opposed to something that's lacking nutrition and just kind of cutting corners, something that has, a lot of effort put into it, and you can really digest and appreciate all that effort in all of its, various details.
Yeah.
What
Love
is
this
the
allusion to food. I'm getting hungry.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
gotta
I'm
have a
hungry.
good bowl of soba or udon.
I want I want a salad now. What's the to close this out, what's the next film festival that we can expect Tokyo Cowboy to be playing at
Yeah,
in the
I
US?
leave on Friday of this week to go to St. Louis, the St.
St.
Louis
Louis.
Film Festival, which sounds like a really great festival. We're actually up for an emerging filmmaker award. There's 5 films with first-time filmmakers that are first-time film feature filmmakers that are up for this competitive award, and fingers crossed that we'll do well there. And then we'll have a little bit of a break, and I think we'll have a number of festivals starting in the new year. But all toward the goal of just getting it out there and finding distribution.
Well, I wish you all the best, man, and I hope it all goes smoothly. Of
Thank you so much. It's delightful to talk to you.
course, it was delightful to have you on, Mark, and thank you so much for being on the show and talking about Tokyo Cowboy. And to everyone watching and listening to this, definitely be on the lookout for Tokyo Cowboy when it becomes available to watch, whether it be a theatrical run or at a local film festival. Please definitely seek this film out. It is well worth your time. Well,
Thank you so
Mark,
much.
you're very welcome, Mark, and thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you all for tuning in, and this is Asian Movie Pulse Interviews. Have a good night, everyone.